Hey guys, and welcome to part 1. In this video we will create the background. Let's begin by creating a new Photoshop document. I use the same aspect ratio as Instagram Portrait, which is 4 wide to 5 high. I go for quite a high resolution. This is because this will enable me to make the finished artwork into a print later on, but feel free to use a lower resolution if you prefer, such as 2000 wide by 2500 high. I always set the colour profile to sRGB. First, let's add a mid-grey solid colour adjustment layer as the base colour and then delete the default background. I always do this just so I can easily change the base background colour later on. Since we want the octafont centred, drag in a couple of guides to help with the positioning. I drag and drop my background stock image, which will make up the sky, and position it so the bottom of the sky is roughly on the horizontal guide. I will mask out everything below this later on. You can see that Photoshop converts it to a smart object automatically, but since this just points to a JPEG, it will not be able to store additional layer information. Therefore, I like to convert it twice. This then makes it into a PSB file and can save additional layers in the smart object if needed. This is useful as I always like to do a preliminary camera raw filter on the stock images I use in a composite, just to do initial colour correction to make the colours as neutral as possible. I usually do some noise reduction and I boost the details a little bit with the clarity and sharpness sliders. Whenever I increase the clarity, I like to reduce the contrast by a similar amount just to keep the natural contrast of the image intact but see more details from the increased clarity. If I then add some retouching type layers into the sky or more clouds, for example, into the background smart object, these will all be affected by this camera raw filter also. To finish up with the background for now, I add a layer mask onto the background smart object. Then using a black to white vertical gradient on the layer mask, I can remove everything below the sky with a slight fade, revealing my mid-grey solid colour adjustment layer underneath. At this point I can simply double click the colour swatch and use the eyedropper tool to pick out a greyish blue hue from the bottom of the sky. I then add a curves adjustment above both the sky and the solid blue-grey colour and bring up the brightness of the darker areas. I generally do this with skies as I want it to be quite flat in terms of contrast, so the main subject will be more prominent. We can easily adjust this later. Finally, I group everything together into its own background group to keep my layer stack organised.